Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the London's Pretty Cool podcast. On this episode, we are talking with Andrew Fleet, the co-founder and executive director of Growing Chefs Ontario. Growing Chefs unites chefs, growers, educators, and community members in children's food education projects. The mission of Growing Chefs is to change the way that children, youth, families, and the greater community learn about and develop healthy relationships with food, and they hope to build and maintain a healthy, empowered community that is engaged with our food systems. Growing Chefs offers such amazing programs for the community, which we will get into in this episode, and Pat and I learned so much about our food systems and why developing a healthy relationship with food at a young age is so important. If you enjoyed this episode, please comment, like, subscribe down below so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes, and it also helps us out a lot. Thanks so much to Andrew for taking the time to speak with us about Growing Chefs. We really appreciate it. And now, on to the episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the London's Pretty Cool podcast. My name is Erin Briggs.
And I'm Patrick Briggs.
And we are back with another wonderful guest. We're here with Andrew Fleet, who is the co-founder and executive director of Growing Chefs. So we've already kind of introduced you, so jumping right in, Andrew. When we were doing some research, we found that Growing Chefs was founded in Vancouver by Mary Schwartz in 2006. And you became involved in this program and started the second chapter here in London. So what made you initially get involved in Growing Chefs?
Initially, I was forced to. I was working as a manager in the same restaurant as Mary, and our owner was one of the, helped provide some money to get it off the ground, and kind of said, hey, if you're managing or cooking in the restaurant, you're going to volunteer for this great organization. And so that's really the story. And it took me a very small amount of time where it clicked and it really resonated with me and provided it was a meaningful experience working with kids. I also grew up in a household of teachers. So my mother, father, both my sisters work in schools and our teachers are EAs of some type. And so it was definitely a bringing together of worlds. For me, I went into the restaurant world when I was 17. I had no interest in food. It was just an easy way to get a job no matter where you went. And I wanted to get money to buy as many concert tickets as I could. That was really the only thing I was interested in, which is why I ended up in Vancouver, because they have a great live music scene. And it just seemed to be, the best means to an end. I quickly realized, if you work for the nicer restaurants, the ones that I'd never had enough money to eat at, that have tablecloths and wine glasses on the table before you sit down, I was deluded into thinking it's you probably make more money there. So I wormed my way into working for the Cambolis Restaurant Group, which was at the time, C Restaurant had won best seafood restaurant in Canada 10 out of 12 years.
Wow.
The chef Robert Clark was on the cover of Vancouver magazine as the top chef in the city at the time. And I lucky enough managed to get a spot there and quickly realized Rob creates new menus sometimes daily. You were expected when you worked there to learn where every ingredient that's used on the menu is sourced from and be able to speak to the farms it came from, how we sourced it, why we source it. He was so focused on environmental sustainability and really saw himself as a chef having a responsibility to ensure that the way he sourced his product was the same way that his successors would be able to source their product for years to come. And as such, he got involved with the Vancouver Aquarium, and Cambolis Restaurant Group was the pilot restaurant group for the Vancouver Aquarium's Oceanwise program, which is a sustainable seafood program. It's now gone nationwide.
Very
We
cool.
were first And that was, I guess, it for me, was starting to work with Oceanwise and really like connecting with farmers and understanding how food was more than fuel for our bodies. It's like, it's an economic driver. It defines our communities. It's social, it's celebratory. It's in many ways mirrors everything that I found a connection with music. Like it brings people together and is something to like celebrate around. And that started to kind of leach into my own life, and understanding that I was one of those kids that was never taught about food in a way that resonated with me, and it resulted in some pretty toxic and unhealthy behavior for myself. And that it was pretty exciting, that concept, to be able to like go work with kids as a food service professional and talk honestly about food. And for me personally, the idea was like, maybe there's some kids that won't end up as a 21-year-old and never eaten a fresh tomato before, like I was, or never been interested in eating anything that was actually good for my body. And that's how it started. And I say long story short, but it never is. In 2008, my wife, my daughter at the time was, I think, 8 months old. I came home from work one day and my wife was just like, so we're moving home to London to be closer to family because I can't do this anymore. Are you going to come or are you going to stay here? And for me personally, I had put 10 years into a career path that wasn't going to be relevant anymore the minute that we moved back to London. The type of restaurant I had worked myself into doesn't exist here. That doesn't to say we don't have amazing restaurants and amazing chefs here, but we don't have like $350, $400 a plate restaurants.
Right.
And this was, like 15 years ago. It's probably more now.
Oof.
And yeah, so as such, I had to face the fact that I needed to figure out a new career path. And I never went to school. So it was like, do I go back to school, or do we open our own restaurant, or do we try and do something different? And Mary made the mistake of going like, yeah, see what happens if you start a Growing Chefs in London. I don't think Growing Chefs has done that again. And I'm pretty sure they won't do it moving forward either. But here we are.
Nothing, that doesn't mean that it's not going well.
No, it started, I spent 4 years when we first moved back to London serving, I went back to just plain old serving tables in a restaurant. Lucky enough, found a restaurant where the chefs were supportive of Growing Chefs, and they only opened for dinner. So I did Growing Chefs just on my own time all day, every day, and then went to work at 5:30 and served tables till, midnight or 1 in, and then repeated the process. And it took 4 years of work here, of building the programming and realizing that that there was a need for it here in the community and a desire for it, and was lucky enough that was the case, because we kind of organically grew into that and were able to, over those first 4 years, establish ourselves. In 2011, I was able to leave the restaurant industry and start working on Growing Chefs full time. Took another couple of years before we hired our first employee, and I think we're a team of 18 right now, or 19.
Wow.
Cool.
It's an amazing story. So it's crazy how it just went from, oh, we're moving back home, got to figure it out, to now you've grown like this great kind of, I don't want to say like empire, but a lot of people know what Growing Chefs is, especially in London and the surrounding area. And just even like your story of just saying like, oh, I needed to find something to get money to get concert tickets. That just resonates probably a lot with me and Patrick. We're very much like, all right, how do we get to go to the next show? How are we doing this? And so it's just a lot of people kind of resonate with that. What was the restaurant that you kind of started in London that let you use their place before?
Yeah, so maybe future episode, if you ever just want to do one on live music, hook me up. But I'd love to be on that panel. So it was called The Only on King. There was an amazing duo of chefs, Paul Harding and Jason Schubert. Paul's still kicking around London. Jason's since moved to Toronto. They were monsters. Like two of the most talented chefs I've ever worked with. They were making a brand new menu every single day from scratch. They literally, like, end of the night kind of sketched out a menu for the next day, would go shopping in the day, find what they wanted, come back, change the menu based on what they bought. And then, like, we came in half an hour before service opened, got all our stuff ready, and then they'd come out and just, like, give us the rundown on the whole menu. There was a few years there where that restaurant in London was as good as any restaurant you could go to in the country. They won 6th best new restaurant in Canada in 2008 from En Route magazine. It was the first time En Route had ever come to London to even consider a restaurant for their list that they do every year. It was huge, and it was a pretty, for if anyone's listening out there that ever ate there, it was a pretty fun time to be just in that environment and be, like, a part of those two chefs' creative energy. And, like, it felt like something new and exciting was happening, like, every single day. It was pretty great.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Why doesn't something like that, why don't you think somebody's doing something like that, or isn't, what's holding people back from making that happen?
That's a great question. One, I think what those guys did at the time was very different than anything else that was happening in London. And since then, I think there's people doing more similar things. Like, to say nothing like that was happening at the time is not really true. Chef Andrew Wolowitz, for one, has been kicking around London for decades and doing really, really great stuff. If you know it, and if you don't know his name, you should, because he's amazing. But no one was doing it as a concept for the restaurant, and I think that's the difference. And as far as why, I think the simple answer is because London's a tough market to do something like that in. We're that perfect size city where we're, like, too big to be a small town, but we're not quite big enough to be a big city. But we're right in that spot where we want all the big city things. There's not necessarily always the market to support all those big city things, if that makes sense. So, like, we're pretty good at having one of everything. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, if there's one good everything, but anything that's very specialized that does one thing in a specific way, we don't have a population that will go out and repeatedly support that thing. It becomes a novelty thing so that people will try once, but when it comes time to, like, sustain it long term. As far as the only, though, I think that if what those guys were doing wasn't so creatively exhausting, and, like, to be honest, why don't people do what they did? Because it's 10 times as much work as having a menu where you do your prep every day and you just have your par levels and other people can come in. Like, it relied on those two guys to be there driving that energy and what they were doing every day. And I think it just wasn't, I don't think their intent was ever to do it for longer than their original 5-year kind of lease. I think they just wanted to do this thing and we're like, we'll do it for a couple of years and see what happens.
To get back to growing chefs, it started, if I'm correct, with a classroom gardening project at Tecumseh Public School. Can you tell us a little bit about how, like what the connection is, how this project came to be?
Yeah. So you introduced me as the co-founder, and so the other co-founder of Growing Chefs is my wife. And she, until this last year, sat on the board of directors for the entire time. Our original board of directors, not knowing how a charity works, was, like, my mother and my father-in-law and Chef Wolowitz, who I mentioned a moment ago. And that was basically it. And Tecumseh Public School was the location for the first spot because when I was on the plane coming back home and had just been given permission to, like, see if Growing Chefs would happen, I called my mother in the airport from Vancouver and was like, I'm landing tomorrow and I want to come into your classroom and show you this program that I've been working on. It was her last year before retirement. So that's why it was piloted there. Was literally because I wanted to show my mother what I'd been gotten into in Vancouver. And the principal was so blown away. And it was Chef Schubert from The Only and Andrew Wolowitz, who's been our original board director, were the two chefs that came with me. And we delivered the program in 2 classrooms there, my mother's and one other. The other teacher's classroom since became a volunteer, like a 10-year volunteer for Growing Chefs. And the principal at the time, the story goes, he just thought it was a really neat program, loved what we were doing, and called the Free Press without telling me. And Ian Gillespie came in and wrote an article on the last visit where we, like, it all accumulated in. Kids grew a little windowsill garden in the classroom, and then we harvested and made a meal out of it in the last visit.
Wow.
Very cool.
Just little microgreens and like pea tenders and things, and we made a little stir fry and salad and everything, and we turned the classroom into a little restaurant and did service. And Ian wrote a little article on it, and the article came out. I had been working late that night before. The phone rang at like 6 something in the morning, like in some ungodly hour of the morning. And it was Wei Chen from Ontario Morning on CBC, who I didn't know who this was. Remember, I've been living in Vancouver for 10 years. I was like, what? Who are you? She's like, can you come on air in 10 minutes and talk about this Growing Chefs program? And I was like, yeah, sure. No idea what it is. The interview starts going, and my wife comes in the room and slips me a piece of paper that says, you're on CBC Radio province-wide. Wow. This is your website. This is your email address. Don't give our home phone number. She's going to ask you for contact info on this little like piece of paper. So as I'm like not awake, hadn't had coffee, reading off the Growing Chefs literature from like the binder from BC to try and answer questions and talk about it. And it came to the end. She goes, well, how can people get in touch with you? And I literally read off this Gmail address that my wife was like setting up in the other room while this was happening. And by the time I logged into our new email address for the first time later that morning, I had ended up doing 2 other radio interviews that morning because the story went big. And there was some, it's been 13 years, but there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 requests from teachers asking if we would bring the program to their school next year. And that was when we realized, so like, okay, this could actually work. And that was the decision to, in the coming weeks, we set it up as a not-for-profit and made a little plan.
That is so cool. That's straight out of a TV show or a movie. That's amazing. So how has, like, that was some of the early years when you got started. How has it really grown in the past 13 years, other than you being able to make it a full-time gig?
First and foremost, the like unsexy way to put it was I had to take a crash course, which happened over a number of years, to learn about London. Like, I moved away from London when I was 17, hadn't only really come back to visit at holidays, and I didn't know the community. And one thing that the restaurant community and chefs aren't super appreciative of is people leaving to go to the big city and then coming back feeling like they're the shit. So I had to, those years that I spent, again, just like working in a restaurant on the front lines, learning where the farmers markets are, learning who the chefs are, connecting with those people, learning what community agencies existed in London and what they did, and developing an understanding of where there were gaps for growing chefs to grow into that was key. And at the same time, both from the fact that I was working in the hottest restaurant in the city at the time, I got to meet a lot of people, which eventually turned into like all of our first donors and supporters I met while serving tables at The Only. Our current board chair, that's how I met her. several of our board members, actually. So all of that groundwork was key, and a huge part of it was just listening and going, okay. As an example, London at the time had a number of agencies that led community garden projects. So we really quickly stopped focusing on urban gardening or any type of really growing at all, and really focused on the cooking and food skills. And then we had to do a whole lot of work on understanding what it was from a curriculum perspective that our program actually did, because the school board in London wasn't particularly interested in giving up hours and hours of classroom time to an organization to come in and just tell kids to eat healthy food. They already get that in health class that's taught by teachers. So we really went back and learned that, again, I think what the main reason why food became such an integral part of my life and focus and became such a passion for me is its parallel with music. It's one of the few unspoken languages that connects all of us as people. There are a lot of people that would argue that music, like food, is essential to life. It's not, and there's lots of famous stories about that and everything. But it transcends time and space and culture and everything. It's a necessity of life. It also is one of the biggest practical applications for what we learn in school. And me growing up not enjoying school was constantly that kid that wanted to know why you were learning everything. I wish that people would have just explained, like, dude, if you want to be a good musician or chef, you need to know math, you need to know science, you need to know history, you need to know geography, because you can't have a fundamental understanding of those two things without understanding how all of those subjects apply to it. And turns out there is decades and decades of research that shows you that if you, for example, want to teach kids fractions, one of the most effective ways to do that is to teach them how to read sheet music, because it's an actual practical application for fractions. When you learn what a quarter note is, or a half note, or an eighth note, or a 16th note, it is just fractions, but you're learning it in a way that it isn't just numbers on a page, or like pages and pages and pages of the same problems that you just do ad nauseum. It's actually doing it in a way where there's something that comes out of it. And I quickly realized that, unlike music, food was really only being taught in schools from a nutritional lens, which to me is the exact same thing as saying, we're going to teach children how to develop an understanding and appreciation of music. We're going to teach them jazz theory, but we're never going to play them music, and we're never going to put instruments in their hands, and we're never going to give them an opportunity to play music themselves, and we're never going to help them discover the joy that there is in music. It's just going to be this fundamental theory. But that's what we do with food. We teach them nutritional facts that you have to memorize, and it's to a point where I never forget 10 years ago standing in front of a group of kids and talking about nutrition with them, and then talking about what they actually eat and have in their lunch. And there was a very obvious disconnect where they were like, we know this is what we're supposed to eat, but this is what we actually eat. And it wasn't the same thing, and it wasn't computing. And that was when it became obvious that there really was an opportunity for growing chefs to grow, because we need to completely change the way we approach how we teach people to connect with food, in schools and out of schools. It's been generations of a disconnect with what we eat, and I could talk for an hour just about that and where it came from. But basically, like, when you spend 50 years driving it into people's heads that we've advanced technology to a point where people don't have to spend time sourcing food, cooking food, preserving food, planning to have enough food to live through the winter, and it's just convenient and cheap, you create a disconnect between all of those connections that we talked about at the beginning, that food, the way that food connects us to the earth, the way food connects us as a community, the way it drives our economy, the way it impacts the environment, the way it impacts our health. you sever all of those ties, and people don't think about that when they go shopping. They just think about, oh, it's on sale for 99 cents. And we have to change that, because without going too deep into it, but like the three biggest reasons, the way we produce, move food around the globe, the way we consume food, and the way we waste food is the second biggest contributor to climate change that we as human beings have done to the world. It's the second biggest. And all it would take is the population demanding that we prioritize sustainable farming, production, transportation, producing, et cetera, practices, food waste policies, that we prioritize environmental stewardship into how we approach those things, and we could completely change the system. It is a customer-driven system, our food system, but our customers aren't paying attention to anything other than price and convenience, really. As well, we spend in Ontario alone $4.6 billion, billion with a B, every year treating the direct symptoms of people's dietary choices in our healthcare system.
Wow.
This is after 18 months of going in and out of constant lockdowns for the sole purpose of keeping our healthcare system from collapsing, right? So when you think about the strain that nearly $5 billion a year has, plus the other 3 point something that's an indirect cause, that's like other shit that happens to people because of something that happened because of their dietary choices, there's huge potential to take strain off of our healthcare system. And then on top of that, there's like a whole bunch of economic reasons. Like food is still one of our biggest economic drivers in the country. We are an agriculture nation, but we import the vast majority of the food that we consume, and we export the vast majority of food that we produce. And that was an interesting one in the past year with the pandemic, is our policymakers realizing very quickly that if the borders close, we don't have a plan to be able to actually feed ourselves as a country. Despite the fact that we're producing like more food per capita than almost anyone else in the world. So with all of that, we need to change the way we teach food. And for whatever reason, we were in the right place at the right time to start exploring that. So to answer your original question, sorry that I went off on a tangent there, but to answer your original question, I got some really handy training in restaurant management when I was out west, and business management, and quickly realized that the main reason, I think, why we don't do a better job educating people about food, why we've eliminated like family studies from schools and kind of any hands-on food education, is it costs money. And nobody has lots of people have shouted from the rooftops that we need to address this problem, but nobody's been able to come up with a working model and a plan to pay for that working model that's actually real. Right. So that's really at its heart what my mission with Growing Chefs is to show that we can and now have built a working model for a system that is changing the way that children look at and approach food. It changes the way that our local school system is approaching food education, and that we can pay for it, and that anybody else can do it too.
So cool.
Wow, that was like, I learned a lot just listening to that. Thank you. And so just like the education that you gave to us and our listeners, a big part of Growing Chefs is the food education projects that you do. So a popular program that's offered is the Growing Communities program, which offers fun educational and hands-on cooking experiences. So what types of things, like obviously you gave us a bit of a rundown, but what types of things are taught during these workshops, and how do you kind of get it through to children to kind of understand what it is that they're learning about with food?
Awesome. Thanks. So all of our programs, Growing Communities, School and our school programming, as well as our own programming that you register for, follows the same, I'm going to say 3 principles, and I have no idea if I'm going to list more or less than that, but we'll see what's going to happen. One, the kids cook the food. We guide the kids. So our whole strategy to everything we do is how can we choose recipes and tasks and activities and divide it amongst a group. So if we're making 3 recipes and there's 30 kids, how can we make sure that all 30 kids have the same number of tasks and that they're all going to finish at the same time, and that we can put it together and make sure that they've created something that everyone that tastes good. So that's the growing chefs process, and that's what separates us from a lot of others. Is we're not chefs doing demonstrations that kids watch. We're not but we're also not just letting kids go at it. It's routinely we'll hear from people that they're just astounded at the quality of food that we can get kids to produce. But that's the trick, is at the end of it, if the kids aren't excited about eating what we've made, then there wasn't any purpose of doing it, because you've just had kids go, oh yeah, cooking was fun, but it doesn't taste very good when you cook from scratch, right? So all of our programming, that's what it does. The kids are doing the work. We're just guiding them through. The food's going to taste great at the end. The second principle is that all of those tasks that we divide out for all of the kids to do are age appropriate and connect with something that they're learning about in school. So we know that our participants are 8, 9 years old, which means they're all going to be in grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, in that range. We know that they're just learning about fractions in math class, or we know they're just learning about liquids and solids in science class, just as 2 examples. So that's going to be our teaching point. And what we've discovered is, when you can bring kids to a table, ask them to do tasks that they've never done before with a bunch of ingredients that they've probably never seen, touched, smelled, or tasted before, you're going to have a bunch of kids with a whole bunch of anxiety and not a lot of confidence, right? But providing them with, oh, I learned about that in school, I understand what that is, I can measure these ingredients out. So it's always looking for a point where a child can find something that they can find confidence in to bring to the table to help open them up to all of those new experiences that we're presenting. The Growing Communities program specifically is, again, in an effort to make it efficient from a cost perspective. We know that cooking programs generally, from just doing research of other programs that have been around and trying to come up with a working model, for us to show up and go be like, hey, guess what, we're Growing Chefs, we're here, sign up for our programs, we're probably not going to get a lot of, unless we spend a lot of money on marketing, people aren't going to know about it. Word of mouth takes a long time to travel. We also know that community groups, and there are many of them in London that are already working with groups of kids, aren't offering cooking programming because they don't have facilities designed for that, or the equipment or the expertise to do it. So we designed the Growing Communities program so that any community agency, or not even community agency, anybody that has a group of kids can contact us, tell us how many kids you got, how old they are, and what you want them to learn, and we'll design your cooking program for your purpose. We'll bring the equipment, the ingredients, we'll set it up in your space, run the program for your kids, everybody eats, and then we take everything out of there and back to us. And it does 3 things. 1, it means no one has to invest in equipment. It means no one has to invest in having a pantry full of all your kind of stock ingredients. And that makes the programming easier and more efficient and more cost efficient for those agencies to run. And then for us, by investing in that equipment, we're getting maximum use out of it, where we can hire our chefs full time and know that we can constantly fill their time with all of these programming requests. So they're just going here, there, and the next place and just going workshop to workshop. And as we've grown, we've been able to buy especially those pantry items in bulk and bring the overall food costs of running those programs down. So that's how the Growing Communities program works. And in any given year pre-pandemic, we were partnering with between 25 and 35 different community groups to offer somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 different cooking workshops a year, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, and approximately 4,000 children would cook with us through that program each and every year.
That's awesome. That's seems like such an amazing program, especially when you can get exactly kind of what you want your kids to learn and get it tailored exactly to what you need. This just seems perfect. And
Well,
current. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it also it does two more things. In that, one, it actually hopefully makes it impactful for the kids when you can like teach them something in a way that's like right on their learning level. It just becomes more impactful for them. But it hopefully teaches them to approach particularly healthy foods in cooking in a totally different and positive way.
Yeah. So is there like, especially for me per se, I'm a very picky eater, and trying to get like vegetables and stuff into my daily eating habits is tough. So I'm guessing you have ways to kind of maybe like mask it or make it so it's not like that obvious that kids are eating vegetables, or do you make it presented in probably a better way that they'll probably enjoy it a little bit more?
That's such a great question, and we could do a whole hour just on picky eating, and I myself before. So three things. One, first things first. When things are prepared properly, especially by a professional chef, you'd be shocked at what things you can make taste really, really good. And so that's the first thing is for the most part. And again, it's the thing we hear again and again and again from people is like they'll eat stuff that we've had kids make in a session and go like, this is better than I've had in restaurants before. And we're like, it's literally made by some of the same chefs. So but that's so that's the first trick. The second one is being being a picky eater is a really new phenomenon in the world, right? Like if you go back to, I'm guessing we're slightly different ages, but let's pretend that we're roughly the same age. My grandparents went through a period of time where like the old adage of like, you can't leave the table until you finish what's on your plate. That came from the fact that they grew up in a time where there was like sometimes long periods of time where there literally wasn't enough food for people, and people were not like we have food insecurity now where we have inequalities in our food system and there are people in our community that don't have resources to go out and buy food. We're talking like there literally wasn't food to go buy. There was nothing. And people were on government issued rations. And when you are that hungry, being a picky eater is like a concept that doesn't exist, right? So this is a new problem we have because we have too much option and too much food. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I love, as a passionate cook, I love having option. And the fact that we can go to the store and literally go, what do I want to cook today? And it's there for you is, I would bet you that if we could go back 100 years and say to our ancestors, this is a library. Any information you want is in this device and it's immediately at your fingertips. You look up whatever the hell you want, it's here. There's also this concept of a modern grocery store where you can go into one store and buy literally anything to eat that is grown in the world. It's there and you can buy it conveniently, quickly, 365 days a year. It's there for you to get. I bet you they would guess that the food is the more life-changing advancement in society, even more than that would be my guess. We'd have to time machine to but if you think about it, 100 years ago, the way your time was dictated on a day-to-day basis completely revolved around food. Are you going to have enough food to last through the winter? Are we preserving enough food to last through the winter? You had people that stayed home and their sole purpose was to shop procure the food, cook the food, and have it ready for the people who weren't staying home. I tried to say that in a non-sexist way.
Yeah.
So this idea of a picky eater comes from the fact that we have options and we have lost learning how to taste food, which sounds bizarre to say, but we don't teach kids how to taste food. And in the past, you learned how to taste food from learning to eat what was available to you. From like you were hungry, so you figured out how to eat. We all know our taste buds evolve, and stuff that you didn't like as a kid becomes much more palatable as you grow up, and you lose taste buds every day. And like there's lots of science behind it. But at the end of the day, this is how we say it to kids, and this is how it starts as a picky eater. You want to learn how to eat more foods, you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Tasting new things is uncomfortable at the start. We have DNA in us from being hunters and gatherers, where literally you had to go out and just find stuff that was available. And anytime you found something new, we would have, as a species, had to go through a process of going, do you think those berries are poisonous? Right?
Yeah.
I'm really hungry, and they're there. So I think we literally in our DNA have this like instinct to be nervous about tasting something new. Same thing, like you had a kill, but it's been 3 days and it's starting to clearly go bad. And can we still eat this? And you're probably going to be a little nervous about it as you start. So we still have that left in us. So we like to talk about it like this with kids. We do this speech a lot. You've gone swimming before?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So what happens when you jump into a swimming pool or into a lake and the water's too cold?
Oh, you have the immediate shock reaction. You gasp, and you can't help it. Everybody, you can't not have the gasp.
Exactly. You have an actual physical reaction to that change in temperature. Your muscles tighten up.
Yeah.
Your shortness of breath. You're doing this. But what happens after a couple of minutes is your body relaxes. And we say this with kids a lot. We're like, did the water change temperature? I'm like, no, of course not. Your body adjusted to the temperature of the water. We're like, right. Our bodies are freaking magical. They have the ability to adapt to anything. When you put a new flavor in your mouth, or new food in your mouth, your taste buds are going to have a very similar reaction. They're going to go into a moment of shock where they're like, what are you doing to me? Is this safe? Is this dangerous? What's happening? We don't give kids an opportunity with food to let their taste buds adjust to new flavors like we do in the water. And as soon as you feel what it's like for your body to relax, and then all of a sudden swimming becomes fun. Is if you can get past that initial reaction that you have as a picky eater to a new flavor where it's like shocking, it becomes really fun to taste new things, especially if you're learning how to cook, because you can start to taste what you can manipulate, and you can start to find things in there that you can coax out in terms of flavor and that you can combine with other things to create new flavors. It's really, really fun. But you have to get comfortable with that initial feeling of being uncomfortable. And again, you talk to any kid that loves swimming, and they're never stressed about, after the first couple times, they're never stressed about how cold the water is. You know that you're going to adjust to it really quickly. And we just need to teach kids and give them opportunities in a safe and positive environment to get comfortable with that feeling of being uncomfortable. And again, there's been research studies done, many of them, that says you have to taste something in and around 10 times before your taste buds will relax and get used to those new flavors, before you can actually think about whether or not it's something you like or don't like. Anything that happens before literally 10 tastes is just your taste buds convincing your brain that it's probably not safe to eat, or it's anxiety, which comes from, that's a whole other story. And that's not 10 tastes of something new. That's 10 tastes every time you taste something that you're not used to tasting, which is the same reason why if you do convince yourself to taste something over and over again, you will notice, like, you can actually observe your brain processing the flavors in a different way than you did 3-4 tastes ago. So it's through those exercises. But at the end of the day, if you don't want to be a picky eater, you just have to get used to that feeling of jumping into cold water.
That's that must be how my dad drinks scotch. That must be how he eventually got used to drinking it. Just like keep on tasting it until you eventually start liking it. I'm not quite there yet myself.
Fair enough.
Growing Chefs also offers kids monthly cooking classes. It's a virtual because of COVID, but can you tell us a little bit about these classes and how our listeners could get involved?
Yeah. It started as once we opened Growing Chefs headquarters in 2017, we, for the first time, had our own space. So we wanted to offer our own programs. Doing a monthly class was all we had capacity for with how busy we were with our school and existing programming. COVID, so every month you could sign your kids up, come in, and we'd do like a class. And it was signing up directly with us. And it was the first time we were able to deliver programming kind of on our terms for our own purposes, as opposed to what other groups wanted their kids to learn. So pretty exciting for us. And we developed a little, we started to notice we had the same kids coming back again and again. What COVID's done for us by forcing us to shut down all the school programming is we're rebuilding our programming structure in a bit of a different way. And we're going to be prioritizing some of our own programming a little bit more moving forward. So this fall, we're actually evolving the kids' monthly cooking classes are going to become family monthly cooking classes. So kind of for younger kids or new beginning chefs who want to come with a parent or caregiver, and you're going to cook together. Same type of classes, but it'll be family focused, and every family will get their own little table to work from and make their own food together. As well, we're going to start running weekly classes for children who've done our programming before. So you'll be able to sign your kids up for 10-week programs where you come every week for 10 weeks and really work on advancing your skills. And we'll have a program for younger kids, kind of in the 6 to 10 age range, and then for older aspiring chefs, kind of 11 and up. And we're really, really excited for those programs. And we just launched a new website a couple of months ago, growingchefsontario.ca. All of the info on those classes will be released in the next probably month and a half.
Very cool.
Awesome.
What's one of your favorite programs that you offer?
I love all of our programs. We do a program with the Catholic School Board, and my friend Ray John, he's a knowledge keeper from Oneida, where Ray John teaches students to speak Oneida.
Wow.
Using
Very
our
cool.
cooking classes as an opportunity to put the words that they're learning into practice as they're doing something. It's been one of the most rewarding programs we've ever done. We've modified it and offered it virtually for the past year. Can't wait to get back to work with them in person. It's amazing. And just in the past few months, we've actually offered versions of it with other school boards with Ray John. So that's a really cool one. There's an episode on CBC radio from Canada Day where they did a little segment on it, if anyone wants to learn more about it, or you can message us. But I think honestly my favorite program is our social enterprise that we run, which is how we pay for all of our programs. We run 2 social enterprises, and I think the reason I'm most proud of them is because it's what's providing Growing Chefs with some steady income that helps to make our programming like financially sustainable, and where I think our program model can legitimately be expanded and built upon. But I think the thing that I'm most proud about is that both of the social enterprise are mission driven. So it's not just something we're doing to generate money. It's actually fits with the intent of our programs. So one of them is we have a team of chefs that make hot lunches for preschools and schools across the city, and we ship out anywhere from 250 to 400 plus lunches every single day that are made from scratch. We sell those lunches to schools and daycare providers essentially at cost. So cheaper than my kids have like pizza lunch from Domino's in their schools. Sorry, Domino's, that I dropped your name there. And it's all scratch made. It's really, really healthy. It's super affordable, and it ultimately pays the overhead on our facilities, keeps our lights on, and it pays for our administrative costs so that we don't have to fund those through donors or through government grants or other means. And I'm really proud of that. And right now I have 3 chefs that are making those meals every day that 2 years ago were teaching in the culinary program at Fanshawe. Like, we have such an amazing, talented pool of chefs. And I honestly believe that program could be expanded and used as a model to get real and good food into hospitals, long-term care facilities, schools, any public space that requires food delivery, where we right now have for-profit companies that are serving unhealthy food to people at for-profit at the expense of people's health. I think we could fix that problem with that model. And I realize it's a huge thing to say, but we've been running this program for 5 years and it works. And at the end of the day, we don't profit from any of those meals, but it pays for our costs and keeps our program going. And there's no reason that couldn't be the case for larger institutions like hospitals. And then the other half of our social enterprise is the events that we run at Growing Chefs headquarters. We've won tourism awards for them. But essentially it brings somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 to 4,000 people through our doors every year. And those events are in the form of like adult cooking classes or corporate cooking classes and events, educational workshops that are all food focused. Sometimes we do private events as well, where there's just really good food served. But ultimately, that's how we generate most of our new donors, and that's how people find out about what they do, is they come into the door for an event and then end up learning about all these cool things that the event that they are attending that they didn't even know were going to fund and support.
Those are 2 great programs. I know I worked at Montessori for a little bit there, and you guys provide the lunches at the kindergarten Montessori there, and I've been able to have some of the leftovers, and it's delicious. It's great. So
even as a big user?
Yeah, there's certain things that I do like, so I was able to try those out, and they were delicious.
Cheers. Thanks for that.
No problem. And I was going to ask about some because most of your programs are for children and families, but you kind of answered that you use some programs for adults through kind of a social enterprise to help pay for kind of stuff like that, right?
Yeah. So pre-pandemic, we did a monthly adult cooking class as well. And then we do lots of private cooking classes for corporate partners and kind of anyone that wants as well. And we just opened a second programming facility. So we have a brand new facility at the Western Fair that literally looks like the set of like Food Network TV show. So like when the kids are cooking in it now, they feel like they're on like MasterChef Junior, which is pretty awesome. But the reason we built that space and have continued to try and build it through the pandemic while we weren't able to offer programming is because we wanted to dedicate our headquarters at the Old Auberge de Petit Prince as a full-time event space, so we could do more of those adult cooking classes and more adult programming. We had demand for it before the pandemic, and so now this is our next steps as we start reopening, is building that portfolio of events back up again.
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to it. I'll definitely be going.
Yeah, I need to up my chef game as well.
Yeah.
You know. But speaking of, Growing Chefs has actually been mentioned in the last 2 episodes of our podcast. London Girls Rock Camp, because you did their lunches when camp was held in person. And while it's been virtual, Growing Chefs has actually been doing classes. They were telling us about this really cool way that you guys were showing your hands to instruct like the kids on how to do the meals and stuff. It was really cool. And also Urban Roots, you're involved in their harvest dinner. How was your experience with each of these groups, and how did you become involved?
Urban Roots are superheroes, all those guys, and everybody should be supporting the work that they do. And London Girls Rock Camp, oh man, my daughter went, my oldest daughter went its inaugural year. Such an amazing program, and man, do we need more of that kind of energy in the world. And the people behind Girls Rock Camp, I mean, we've been partnering with them for years and years through the Greco Grass Festival and oh man, so all of Sav's projects and Adam's projects that they've been working on, we've been riding their coattails as much as possible. Partnerships has been at the core of the it's been a core priority for Growing Chefs for since we started, especially groups like, I mean, Girls Rock Camp and Urban Roots are two great examples of like the type of people who are like, we see a gap, we want to fill that gap, and we want to make something happen and make this community better. When you meet people like that, how do you not want to just like, okay, what can I do to help you get to where you're going? And then those people help us get to where we're going. So like when pre-Girls Rock Camp, when all those guys were running the Greco Grass Festival every year, that we would be involved in and run programming at, and we were one of the Greco Grass Festival raised close to $50,000 for Growing Chefs over its 10 years. And then that relationship morphed into Girls Rock Camp, and there is a pretty good chance that one of us will be on your podcast in another year or two talking about the stuff that we're working on now behind the scenes that we're getting ready to talk about. And same thing with Urban Roots. Like, we support them with their dinner every year. I believe one of my staff members is on their dinner like planning committee. And then we use a ton of their produce that they sell us at a massively reduced price, which is all part of their business model at Thirds, right? So like, that's the thing, is when you have people that just genuinely want to make the community a better place, it's a tough slog, man. Like, trying to make a community a better place is like trying to turn a cruise ship around, right? Like, it's you're working against all of the natural elements to make something like that happen, and it's hard. And you meet a lot of people that have a lot of really great ideas, that have a lot of great energy, that don't, that do a thing and then they're gone. So when you meet the people who are like in it for the long haul and really committed to making their vision happen, you want to support them, and then they want to support you. And I don't know if Growing Chefs would be where we are without the support of like those guys and a long list of other amazing community groups that have supported us and that we've supported along the way. That's just kind of how you have to look at it. And yeah, there's I hope it's fewer people, but there's people who've been here longer than we have and that have a lot more power than we do, that are fighting against a lot of the stuff, that fight against change because it doesn't benefit them, right? Like, that's it's kind of the problem with our world today. And so that idea of partnerships, I think, just comes from like the reality of, if you want to make positive change, you can't do it by yourself. You gotta have people in your corner, and you gotta listen and compromise and constantly reevaluate everything you're doing, because if you don't, other people are going to do that, and they're going to do it and find a weakness. So if you're doing it harder and faster first, and that's maybe one of the biggest things that those type of partners can bring to you, is like, that's the safe space to look at and learn about your weak spots and figure out how to fix them, so that when people that don't have those good intentions come about trying to find cracks in the foundation, that you've already been there working on it, or that there's a bunch of people down there working on it with you and for you. And yeah.
When you look back on how Growing Chefs has grown, what would you say is like your biggest accomplishment thus far?
that we're still here.
Very cool.
Honestly,
Yeah.
that we're still here. If you look at the staff that we have and the list of chefs that still have and still volunteer with us, I mean, that says it all. That I have the talent pool working on my team. I've done something right to have those people in my corner. Same thing with to say that, like, we came up in a conversation that you were having with Girls Rock Camp about all the amazing things they do and they have to talk about. It's a pretty big win.
They've you've been a big part of it since their almost inception as well, right? So and anything that Sav does, Sav's the best.
Can I know we're going over time. When I first met Sav, she invited me out to a coffee shop with her friend Ryan, and told me the idea for the Greco Grass Festival and said, we want growing chefs to be involved. I wasn't anything. I had only created an illusion of like there being substance to the organization at that point. We had a great program, but there wasn't a lot underneath it. And they were like, this is what we want to do. It's going to be this crazy eclectic music festival. And like, we're going to turn the Children's Museum into an adult playground. And it's going to have like all the hottest bands you've never heard of. And I remember I sat at the table. I was like, if you guys can pull that off, I'm there, like 100%. And I left the meeting and never thought about it again until like 12 months later. There was like, okay, here's the date. Here's what we need from you. Here's where you're going to be. And I went, oh shit, they made it happen. And that first night at that first Greco Grass Festival, now 11 years ago, if not 12 now, that was when I knew. I was like, oh, we're gonna do this. Like, that was the moment at the Greco Grass Festival with Savannah where I was like, I think we can make this happen. Like, if we have a crew of people like this that can pull this off in support of this thing that I'm trying to build, let's do this. Yeah, mm-hmm. She's a force. Holy smokes.
Oh yeah.
What are some things people can look forward to when it comes to growing chefs, upcoming events, and anything else you'd like our listeners to know, like where to follow, websites and stuff, because we're going to get into some London stuff.
Cool. One, as soon as it's safe to do so, we are going to open up programming in our new programming space at the Grove. It looks incredible. I can't wait to invite you guys in to cook with us, and anyone that's listening. It's going to be awesome. There isn't a space like this. The closest thing to it is either a TV set or like a culinary, like a post-secondary culinary program that you have to pay a lot of money to have access to. It's going to be awesome, and we're going to have so many more different types of programs that people can engage with us in, and I can't wait to show it to you. Same thing when we can open our events back up at Growing Chefs headquarters. They're pretty great. So keep an eye for when it's safe to do so. In the meantime, we have launched Growing Chefs at Home over the past year. That's what we've been doing for essentially the past 18 months, is creating content for you to use in your home. So we've created over 100 different recipe videos that are actually designed for kids to follow along with. So as opposed to, finding your favorite Jamie Oliver, Gordon Ramsay recipe and then figuring out how to incorporate your kids into making that, these recipes are actually designed in a way that we've organized how and where you can bring your kids of different ages in and find the tasks for them like we do in our programming. They're also recipes that are designed for people to explore at home in a fun way that'll hopefully meet that balance of finding some good things you may want to keep in your own home repertoire, but also challenge you to try some new things and learn some new techniques. There's resource videos as part of Growing Chefs at Home for parents who want to learn some of the strategies that we use to help kids approach, who are picky eaters, approach new foods. There's how to set your kitchen up safely to cook with your kids. There's everything from knife skills to like how to look at a recipe and understand how to find different tasks and organize that for kids. And we've created lesson plans for teachers that they can, food-themed lesson plans that they can deliver to their classes without us being there. All of this content was not just stuff to occupy our time for the past year, but it's all going to be used as extension activities. So when you come and participate in our programming and go, now what do we do? Well, you can go home and explore this little library of resources that we've created for you. You can find it all on growingchefsontario.ca. We've got pretty active Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook pages that you can follow as well that have links to all of that content. And coming up in 3 weeks, we are doing our next little, all of our events are fundraisers. That's what the whole purpose of us having events. We have an outdoor wood fire pizza oven at Growing Chefs headquarters. And it's one of the only things that we do where we don't use 100% local food. We import the flour from Italy. It's specific flour for making pizza crust in an authentic way. And we make really authentic thin crust pizza in the wood fire oven, but we use really out there zany locally sourced toppings for it. And every menu is different. We've got 4 pizzas. You rarely see the same one on a menu twice, and usually not twice in the same season. And our next one's coming up at the end of August, and we're announcing the menu for it in the coming weeks. And I believe the guest chef for that pizza night is Grace Restaurant downtown. So it's going to be one not to miss. It's takeout only, but you can order your pizzas online and come pull into our parking lot, pick them up. You'll love it.
Wow, all that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, everybody get involved. Absolutely. Okay, so we are going to hit our London questions here. I'm sure this will be very fun for you because I'm sure will have like some very great answers for this actually. So you're first off the bat, I'm going to love this. It might even be tough for you. Your favorite place to eat in the city?
Oh, that's so not fair. But there's way too many. Any style in particular?
You know, you could always answer your own kitchen, you know, if you want it to be fair.
For authentic wood fire pizza, you want to come to Growing Chefs. For Detroit or New York style, you want to go to Thick and Thin in Old South. But if you want like more traditional wood fire pizza, you want to go to Pizzeria Madre. My favorite, the place I've eaten at more than any other place in London is the new Deli in the Covent Garden Market. Mon runs it, is her name. She is East Indian, but grew up she grew up on a Caribbean island. So she has this really weird fusion of like Caribbean food. She grew up in Fiji. That's where she grew up. So it's this weird like Indian island fusion food. It's super cheap. Everything's scratch made. It's so delicious. And she has a different menu every day. So I think go there. If you want to do a really fancy dinner, you could go to like Craft Pharmacy, Chef Wolowitz's restaurant on our board. Got to give him a shout out. And I ate a company bar a couple of weeks ago in Old South with the Wolf Brothers. Holy smokes, was that good. For something, if you want something really different and out there, it's about as Toronto or Vancouver as you can get in London.
Those are all some great answers.
I agree.
So many I didn't say. Sorry, everyone.
London is considered the city of neighborhoods. What would you say is your favorite neighborhood in London?
I live in Old East Village, and my wife grew up here, and my brother-in-law lives 10 doors that way, and my mother and father-in-law live 2 blocks that way, and all my band members live like on this block here. So I should probably just say Old East.
What's your band name, by the way?
I play with Marty Coles.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no way. So does my partner, Thomas Perquin.
Yeah, Thomas.
He plays drums. Yeah, that's my boyfriend. Yeah.
Well, there you go. And then, so sometimes play in Marty's band and sometimes not. And then Marty and her husband and myself and all the same members from our band play in a bluegrass cover band called Kevin's Bacon Train, which is kind of a little joke.
I know that band as well. Yeah.
One of our parents' favorite bands. They love going and dancing.
That's our demographic.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm so glad we made this connection. So your London small business you couldn't live without.
Oh man. Western Fair Farmers Market, Jill's Table, downtown. Yeah, Locomotive Espresso. That's a literal one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go with those three.
Awesome.
If you were to have a perfect day in London, what would it entail?
Farmers Market in the summer, probably the Masonville Farmers Market, because that's my favorite right now, just for where we are in the season. With lots of pastries and baked goods and stuff that I probably shouldn't eat as much of as I do. I do a workout with my wife. She's the general manager at Hybrid Fitness, which is a biggest independent gym in Canada, actually, in London. So we go do a class there. Then I take my dog and my girls and we go for a big walk in one of our awesome trails that we have in the city. Medway Creek is my personal favorite because I grew up in that neighborhood and that was my youth, but there's so many great trails in the city to go on. So do a big trail walk. And then I'm sitting in my backyard in our little oasis that we built back here and just have some friends over. And I have a big green egg barbecue, so I'd probably cook some great food on the barbecue and have just like a food party and jam with some friends.
Perfect day. Perfect day.
Yeah.
If there was a show at the music hall to cap the day off, we could go do that. Remember when Sturgill came to London?
Sturgill Simpson, my buddy is a huge fan of his. I haven't listened to him a ton.
He's a little country for some people, and I get it.
Is there a hidden gem in this city for you? Now that could be a person, place, or thing.
There are many. Any of Saf's projects. Urban Roots too, another hidden gem in the city. You know what? There's so many, and that's the thing. I grew up in London, couldn't wait to get out of here, swore I'd never come back with my family and I would never live here. Now that I do as an adult and a little bit more mature, realized that whole mindset of like, oh, there's nothing here was me. It wasn't the city. There's tons of stuff here. Again, back to the beginning of the conversation, there's a little bit of almost anything if you know where to look and are willing to find it. Whatever you're into, you can probably find a very small group of people who are doing it somewhere. You just
dedicated, hard at it.
And I will say, just because it's totally nothing to do with food, Simon over at the Sugar Shack, that's a pretty crazy hidden gem in London that we have that guy in that facility doing the work that he does. Same thing with Christoph over at Aeolian Hall is another one that I would say is a huge hidden gem. Aeolian as a whole and Christoph running the sound there. Oh man.
Those are some great choices. I love Simon. Literally one of the best people in the city.
Totally.
Okay, we are going to get Aaron, do you want to introduce this next section?
Yes, we're right to the end. We're getting to our game. It's a very popular, very famous, awesome game by London's Pretty Cool podcast called This
or That.
So in this game, we're going to give you two very options that are pretty similar in London. And you're going to choose which one you would rather go to or do. Very quickly, no explanation needed, just kind of like a bang, bang, bang. Get it? Got it? Good.
Got it. Good.
All right. So starting off, we have Western Fair Market or Covent Garden Market.
Oh, that's not fair. I can't answer that.
That's
I will say, oh gosh. On any Saturday, I start at Western Fair Market, and then I go to Covent Garden Market.
There you go.
I literally
like
go to
that.
both every single weekend.
Sunfest or Home County?
Both. Shouldn't be choosing between those. They're on different weekends.
We're just saying if you had to choose.
home county.
Hmm.
Sunfest is a little overwhelming, but I love it.
I agree. Yeah.
Masonville Mall or White Oaks Mall?
Masonville's got the farmers market. Go on Masonville.
Dundas East or Richmond Row?
Oh, I already told you I live in Old East, so Dundas East. It's sketchier too, so you gotta love that little seasoning,
little edge to it.
Yeah.
Springbank Park or Gibbons Park?
Gibbons.
Nice.
We've got Fanshawe or Western University.
You're asking the person that never went to school. Fanshawe. It's more practical application.
I love that answer. That's very good.
Odyssey Records or Grooves Records?
Oh, snap. Well, Odyssey. What about Speed City?
Okay, you can.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Throw that in there as well. Absolutely. We should be tossing in all three. Absolutely. Those are the big three.
But really, we all have room enough for records from all three.
They each host their own like distinct. They are their own shops, and I like that about them.
There's definitely, if you have something in mind, like if you're shopping with a purpose, you can probably choose which one depending on what you're looking for.
Totally.
And then same thing, if you're shopping without a purpose, then you'd choose differently for them as well.
Totally. The Brown and Dixon bookstore or City Lights?
Ooh, good one. Yeah, I gotta give Jason the shout out. Go Brown and Dixon.
Nice.
Even though I grew up going shopping at City Lights.
Would you rather bike on the TVP or hike in one of the environmentally significant areas on the trails?
I'd hike.
Hiking around London is awesome. All the trail systems are really great. London Brewing Co-op or Anderson's?
Oh man, I don't drink.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. We could do a coffee.
No.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
It's totally okay. But I will say back to like all of those partnerships, and Anderson's great, and I love them, and they're the loveliest people. But Jeff started On the Move Organics, which is obviously connected to the brewing co-op, within weeks of starting Growing Chefs. And we did small business planning together. We've grown up together, and he lives like 2 blocks right there. So I'm going to go brewing co-op, and Aaron lives literally right there, like 4 houses over. So
amazing.
Go brewing co-op.
Black Walnut or Asmara Coffee?
Oh, jeez. One of my former employees is making all the pastries at Black Walnut right now, so shout out to Marissa for that. But man, what's his name at Asmara? Because he's the funnest guy to go talk to.
Oh, I'm not sure, but we've been hearing great things about him. Yeah.
He's a joy. So let's go Asmara. Sorry, Marissa.
Perfect. Well, that's all of our questions.
Oh,
yeah.
They're hard.
Yeah, we're trying to make them tougher and tougher as they go on. But thank you so much, Andrew, for taking the time to talk to us. Is there anything else you'd like to plug before the end of the episode?
No, just thanks. I hope you have lots of listeners, because there is so much cool shit that goes on in the city, and so often our city gets painted with brush that we're boring, or we're a bunch of stuck-up conservative, or all the racist things, and all that stuff is important to note, because we got to do better, all of us, and us that want to do better, and you have a large role to play in that. But there's so much cool stuff here, and I hope more people listen to it, because if you guys were doing this when I was a kid, maybe I wouldn't have been so quick to want to get out of here when I was 17.
That's very sweet. That's very sweet of you to say. We inspire the children. London's Pretty Cool is for the kids, as Old Dirty Bastard would say.
I'm Andrew from Growing Chefs, and you're listening to London's Pretty Cool Podcast.